Hello and welcome to Porto Charities Inclusion in Action webinar series. Today we are here with Emily Ibrahim, and first I want to tell you a little bit about our center, and then I'm going to turn it over to Emily. So we are the Porto Charities Center for Learning and Leadership. We were recently established to house all of Porto Charities' educational initiatives, and our fearless leader is Maureen Ashby, who is here with us, and she will be moderating the chat and helping with our questions and answers. So if you have anything that you want to know, please feel free to pop it into the chat. My name is Carmen Chiapetta, and I'm the outreach coordinator for Porto Charities. So that means you will get emails from me or get nudged to learn about our offerings. We do grants for schools. They apply for financial grants. We work on teacher development. We also work with principals to help them lead inclusive schools. And we do educational outreach, and that's where these webinars fall in. We are part of Porto Charities, and we have three major program areas, which is our Catholic education, meaningful employment, and community engagement. And we really strive to make a place of belonging for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in our communities. We have upcoming workshops. Another series in July on dyslexia. You do not want to miss this, so please go on our website and register. And if you are a teacher in the Diocese of Arlington, we have an in-person workshop on August 11th. So please go ahead and go to our website and learn more about these things. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Emily Ibrahim. Emily is an adjunct professor of Christian teaching at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. She has a PhD in educational leadership, and she has been teaching Spanish for 11 years. I first met Emily through her book, Eddie el Elefante, that she wrote as a comprehensible input book for Spanish teachers. And I love it. I'm looking forward to using it even more in my classroom. So if you're a Spanish teacher, maybe you have encountered Emily's book before, and I hope you have. She is also an excellent, amazing teacher who has such a heart for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities that she now started her own consulting company called Forward Abilities to really move that project forward. And so I am so happy to introduce you to Emily and have you get the chance to know her and hear her teaching. So Emily, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Carmen. Well, hello, everybody. I am really excited to be here with you today. And my computer is telling me that my internet connection is unstable. So if I am going in and out, please bear with me or let me know. We all good so far? Wonderful. All right. Well, so we are here today to talk about how to unlock the potential, how to see success for students with disabilities in the, I put in parentheses, foreign language classroom, because while that is our focus, the foreign language classroom, I truly believe that almost all of the principles that we're going to talk about are really applicable in every subject area and just in life when supporting people with disabilities. So I'm really excited. I hope whatever you teach or whoever you are, if you're a parent or you work with people with disabilities in some other capacity, that you walk away from these two webinars inspired, but also equipped to help people with disabilities, students with disabilities to be successful, whether it's in the foreign language classroom or as a parent or a special ed teacher or a math teacher or a history teacher. So I want to start by telling you a little bit of my story. When we moved to Louisville, Kentucky, I got a little part-time job at a small Christian private elementary school as a Spanish teacher. And after they hired me, they said, oh, by the way, we have an inclusive program for kids with Down syndrome. Would you be willing to teach Spanish to the kids with Down syndrome? They're integrated into their classes with their typically developing peers, and they go to all the special areas, you know, art and music and library and PE, but they've never been to Spanish class. Would you be willing for them to come to Spanish class? And I said, sure. I've never taught kids with Down syndrome. I've never studied how to teach Spanish to kids with Down syndrome, but I would love for them to come to Spanish class. And so they did. And that started really a journey that literally changed the trajectory of my life. I'll tell little bits more about my story as we go, but that was kind of what got me into what I do now, which is training foreign language teachers to include students with disabilities. Was just this God-given opportunity that I wasn't expecting, that literally transformed my life and the trajectory of my life. So in that story, the kids with Down syndrome were integrated into the classroom, included in the classroom in everything except the foreign language classroom. And that is not unusual. Like that's the typical thing for kids with Down syndrome and other students with developmental disabilities. They are by and large excluded from the foreign language classroom. This is for many reasons, but a big one being that people think they can't learn a foreign language, or that it's going to be harmful to their development, harmful to their first language to expose them to another language. Maybe the teacher isn't prepared to include them. Maybe priority is given to special services. Maybe the parents have been advised by professionals, maybe a speech language therapist or a psychologist, not to expose them to another language. So many reasons why they are excluded, but this is documented that students with developmental disabilities are largely excluded. They don't have the same opportunity to learn a foreign language as their peers. I have a dear friend, maybe you've heard of her. Her name is Donna Tatum Johns, if you're familiar with certain circles in the foreign language world. And she used to teach at one of the top private schools in Kentucky. She was a French teacher. And she told me about the policy at this school, this, top school in the state, where the students with learning disabilities or language disabilities, we're not talking about intellectual disability, just a learning disability or a language disability, were not allowed by policy of the school to take a foreign language in middle school. So you had all these kids that were systematically excluded from the foreign language classroom because they had some type of disability. But then they got to high school and there was a requirement that they have 3 years of a foreign language to graduate from high school. So now the school is presented with a problem. They've been excluded, they weren't allowed, and now they have to graduate. So what did the admin do? They decided that the kids with the disabilities that should receive the most support were not going to be allowed to take a foreign language in person. They were not going to be allowed to take a spoken foreign language, that they had to take American Sign Language online. And so these kids with disabilities were basically put in a room on the computer with someone to monitor while they received instruction online. And it was disastrous, as you might imagine, right? Disastrous. So the school had to rethink and decide that, okay, we have to let these kids take a foreign language. So a lot of these kids entered into my friend Donna's class. Donna kind of exemplifies everything that I'm going to talk about in this webinar, without, thinking about it. It's just who she is and how she teaches. And so these kids who weren't exposed to a foreign language in middle school, who had a traumatic, disastrous experience attempting to learn sign language online, entered into French class, and they were all successful. Some of them wildly successful, because they were given the opportunity and because someone believed in them and because these principles that we're going to talk about were followed. So what kind of disabilities are we talking about here? We're talking about intellectual disability, could be a speech or language impairment, could be autism, or any other kind of learning disability, any developmental disability, largely excluded from the foreign language classroom. But we are here to change that. So we are going to begin with a game. All right. You don't have to turn on your computer screen, but I love participation. So Carmen already encouraged us to find the little reaction button. If you look at the bottom of your screen, at the little bar, there's a heart, and then there's a little arrow. So I would like everyone, whether or not you turn on your video so I can see your beautiful face, I would like everyone to give a thumbs up. Can you do that? Yeah, you can even send it with an effect and it like floats up the screen. It's pretty cool. Wonderful. Okay, now I need you to give a thumbs down. And to do that, um, go to where the three little dots are, and it might come up as frequently used. If not, you can search emoji. You can like type thumb in the search bar there and find the thumbs down, and you can give it thumbs down. You can make it with an effect so it floats up the screen. Awesome. Yes, good job, K. Martin. I love all those floating thumbs downs. All right, so that's what you're going to have to do to play this game. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to put a statement on the screen. If it's true of you, I want you to give a thumbs up. If it's not true of you, I want you to give a thumbs down. And I might ask you a follow-up question. Um, And if I do, feel free to unmute yourself and respond. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just type your answer in the chat. But I would love to have your participation here. So here is the first statement. I am a great cook. I am a great cook. Thumbs up or thumbs down. All right, we got a good mixture here. Some people are great cooks, some people aren't. Carmen, I didn't see your thumb. It went away before I could see it. Okay. So Johanna, you gave a thumbs up. What are you really good at cooking? You can unmute yourself or you can type it in the chat.
I am, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I think I am a good cooker for Spanish food.
Ooh, I'm gonna come to your house and eat. Can you make me some tortilla and paella? I would love that. All right.
I'm not part of the tortilla, but I can do probably paella. I like to, try everything new.
Okay, I'm coming over tomorrow. All right, next one. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I am generally very creative. Oh, we got lots of creative people here. Oh, iPhone user, not creative. Okay, Kay Martin, you're creative in what way? What's something creative that you enjoy doing or that you're good at?
Well, I knit and crochet and do watercolor. I think teaching is creative. And so,
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you. All right, next one. Get ready. I am good at bargaining. I'm good at bargaining. Oh, it looks like people are having to think about this one. Gabri's good at bargaining. Hey, Martin, not so good at bargaining. So this is a big like difference in my household because I do not like confrontation at all. I do not like to be assertive. It makes me really uncomfortable. And my husband is Egyptian. And if you are not assertive and confrontational in Egypt, you die. Like you won't get anything. You will never get what you deserve if you're not like assertive. So my husband is all about bargaining. And when we first got married, it like really embarrassed me. Like he was trying to bargain at the airport to not pay for luggage. I was like, you cannot do that. But he has saved us thousands of dollars. Like when we go to buy a new car, the car dealer can't wait for us to leave because they've been so beaten by my husband. Um, so I'm terrible at bargaining and he's really good at bargaining. All right, next one. I am strong in math. All right, we got mixed things here. Math is not my strong suit at all. Give me creativity, but I don't find math very creative. So All right, next one. I can play a musical instrument. Maureen can. Johanna cannot. No. Most people here can't. Carmen, what was yours? I didn't see your thumb. No? Okay, Maureen, what instrument do you play?
I've played the piano since I was in kindergarten.
Okay. Anybody tried to play an instrument? You can like raise your hand with the reaction. You've tried, but you were unsuccessful. Maybe you dreamt of playing the guitar and, oh, Carmen raised her hand. Carmen, what did you try to learn?
I tried to play the piano, and I have a very vivid childhood memory of my teacher playing a note and then playing another one and asking me if it was higher or lower, and me getting it wrong every time. Like,
Oh
I
my goodness.
didn't hear what she was doing. It was like core difficult memory.
Wow. Sorry about that, Carmen. All right. I played a trumpet and the piano and the mountain dulcimer. Do y'all know what the mountain dulcimer is in Virginia? No. It's from the Appalachian Mountains. It's a stringed wooden instrument. Some of you do. Awesome. Sits on your lap and you like strum it. Um, Play some good folk music with the mountain dulcimer. All right. Next question or next statement. I can remember dates easily. All right, Kay Martin, good for you. iPhone user, good for you. Oh, wow. Most of y'all can't, I cannot remember dates easily. Like my husband remembers everybody's birthday. I know like 3 people's birthdays. Like seriously, that's about maybe 4. That's it. So good for y'all that can remember dates easily. That's amazing. All right, next one. I think we've got 2 more now. I have a green thumb, which means I take good care of plants. iPhone, iPhone user, what kind of plants do you like to take care of? Okay, go ahead.
Me? Is that me?
Yes, ma'am, that is. Uh-huh.
Flowers, any kind of, except orchids. I'm not very lucky with orchids.
Oh, yeah, those are hard.
They are.
I agree. Thank you. Good. All right, last one here. I can carry a tune, meaning I have a pleasant singing voice. Just pleasant. You don't have to be like an opera singer. Just a pleasant singing voice. Maureen. Oh, Carmen probably comes from not being able to hear up and down. All right. Well, we can start a band and Carmen can be in charge of like recording. Okay, well, thank you so much for playing that game with me. That wasn't just a silly game. Kay Martin says, I sing with my hands ASL. I love that. I love that. Actually, I wanted to learn ASL, not Spanish, but my mom made me learn Spanish because my grandfather was from Chile.
That's what I teach, actually, ASL.
ASL, awesome. I love it. Glad you're here. So this silly game that we played really had an important purpose, and that is we're all different, right? Like Maureen plays the piano, but Carmen can't tell the difference between high and low notes. We all are good at some things and we all struggle with other things, right? We all have things that we excel at and things that we just really don't do well. And this is a natural, normal part of life. It's true for every single human being except Jesus Christ. He didn't have any weaknesses, right? But he was different, right? Different than other people. So he still had differences. He just didn't have weaknesses. But this is normal. And so I want you to keep this at the forefront of your mind as you work with students with disabilities, as you interact with people with disabilities, that differences and weaknesses are normal. They're a typical part of life. So keep that in the forefront of your mind also as we just go through these webinars together. Now, if we were in a different setting, as in not in a webinar where most of the people are teaching a foreign language, they're not foreign language teachers, and we were playing this game and I were put up the statement, I can learn a foreign language, most people would probably give a thumbs down, at least in the United States. If you were to go around and say that statement to people, most people would give a thumbs down. No, I can't. Like, I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, oh my gosh, you're so smart. Like, you can speak 3 languages. Like, I studied Spanish for 5 years and all I can say is hola. You know, like, people don't think that they can learn a foreign language. But I would tell them, no, give a thumbs up. It is true of you. You can learn a foreign language, even if you have an intellectual disability, even if you have language impairment, even if you have a learning disability, even if you have neurological differences, you can learn a foreign language. And I don't just say this as some like fanciful hope or idealistic thing, but because I have witnessed it over and over. I have seen it. And so I'm going to be talking to you a lot about that right now. So as I told you in my story, I had the pleasure and the honor of teaching students with Down syndrome. But I didn't just teach them in the classroom. I did academic scholarly research on their ability to learn a foreign language. That's what my doctoral studies, my PhD research was I taught Spanish to kids with Down syndrome and researched what they were able to acquire. So we're going to look very briefly at 2 studies that I conducted on foreign language learning in children with Down syndrome. And people with Down syndrome, it's such a unique population for this purpose that we're talking about, for learning a foreign language. Why? Because you might not teach a student with Down syndrome. Maybe you teach a student with language impairment. People with Down syndrome have language impairment. Maybe you don't teach a student with Down syndrome, but your student has intellectual or cognitive impairment. People with Down syndrome have cognitive impairment. Maybe you're not teaching someone with cognitive impairment, but they got a concussion and they have problems with memory. People with Down syndrome have deficits in working memory and short-term memory. Maybe you just have a student with ADHD. It's really hard to have them in class because they have all these attention deficits. People with Down syndrome also have deficits in attention, and they have a much higher rate of having autism than just the general population. So imagine if kids with Down syndrome can learn a foreign language, then your student with ADHD, your student with autism, your student with language impairment can also be successful in the foreign language classroom. So let's take a look at the evidence. So the first study that I want to talk to you about was my dissertation research. And I had the greatest honor and joy of my life of teaching Spanish to children with Down syndrome at the local Down Syndrome Association here in Louisville. It was a 6-week summer camp, and I got to be part of the curriculum. So I got to teach 3 classes of elementary age students of just kids with Down syndrome, 5 days a week, 45 minutes a day for 6 weeks. So if you think about it, really, that's not a lot of exposure to language. Think how much language a baby is exposed to before they begin speaking. 45 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 6 weeks is not that much exposure. So what are these kids with, cognitive impairment, memory deficits, language impairment gonna be able to do in a foreign language in that amount of time? So I assessed them at the end of these 6 weeks on receptive vocabulary, that's how much they can understand, and expressive vocabulary, that's how much they can produce. So this is what the assessment for receptive language looked like. I would show them this page with 4 pictures, and I would say, for example, show me da la vuelta, show me turns around. And they would point to what they think is turns around, which is be here. They could just point to it. They didn't have to say anything. So that's how I assessed what they learned receptively, what they could understand. So what were the results? So I had 10 kids. I taught many more than 10, but 10 that were actually part of the data collection. I tested them on 45 vocabulary words that they were exposed to in class. And on average, they were able to identify 27.8 words. That's a lot. That's a lot of words. And my student that learned the most, or that at least could demonstrate the most, got 41 out of 45 correct. That's amazing. Like, even if that were a typically developing child, I'd be like, whoa, that's a lot. That's a lot of vocabulary that they were able to show me that they learned. This is an example of the expressive assessment. So I would show them one picture and I would say, what is it? ¿Qué es? And then they would, to get it correct, they would have to respond in Spanish, bebe, or drinks. And that's the translation. So they would have to say it in Spanish for it to be correct. Now, individuals with Down syndrome have language impairment, but especially they have impairment in expressive language. So everybody understands more than what they can speak. But the difference between understanding and speaking in Down syndrome is much greater. And so typically people with Down syndrome can understand much more than what they're able to express. So even as I was preparing for this study, you know, there was maybe some doubt, well, should I even measure expressive? Like, are they even going to be able to learn any expressive language with such a small amount of exposure to the language? Because a child with Down syndrome has to hear a word so many more times than a typically developing child to learn that word. So again, 10 students, I assessed them on 35 vocabulary words, and on average, they got 12.6, almost 13. I could show them a picture and they could tell me what it is. And the maximum correct was 27. That's a lot. That's a lot. So I would call that success, right? Like, these students were learning. Now, I had some participants that also had a dual diagnosis of autism, of ASD. And so I did not lump them together with my students with Down syndrome only, because autism affects language development. And so I wanted to look at, how did the students with Down syndrome and autism compare to their peers with only Down syndrome? So I did this special type of comparison where I compared each student with a dual diagnosis, that means Down syndrome and autism, to the group of students with Down syndrome only. And if they got a certain score that was considered rare or abnormal, that would mean there's a significant difference. So I did 24 different comparisons, 12 for receptive and 12 for expressive, and there were no abnormal or rare scores. That means that the kids with a dual diagnosis performed about the same as their peers with Down syndrome only. So even the kids that had Down syndrome and autism were able to be successful and learn some Spanish in just 6 weeks. That's pretty cool. All right, you say, well, I'm not going to teach just a class of kids with Down syndrome. Like, I've got a whole bunch of typically developing kids too, and I need to know, like, if this kid with a disability can actually be successfully integrated into the classroom. And the answer is they can. They can. As I told you in my story, like, I was teaching kids together with their typically developing peers. And unfortunately, that school shut down. That's where I was originally going to do my doctoral research, but they decided to shut down that campus, and it was no longer feasible for me to use that as my doctoral research. But I was able to gather data and actually do a study on what they had learned in their time with me. Now, the interesting thing is that in these comparisons that I made, some of the kids with Down syndrome experienced up to 2 years less exposure to Spanish than their peers. Why? Because I was at the school for 2 years, and then I left for 2 years to explore other things. And then I realized that I wanted to go back. And by the grace of God, my position opened back up again, and I went back for 2 years. So we're talking about a 6-year time period, but for the 2 years when I was gone, the students with Down syndrome were no longer included in the classroom. Back to what we heard at the beginning, they're largely excluded. And so I was there for 2 years, gone for 2 years, back. And, those kids that weren't in the classroom for 2 years when I was gone were put back in the classroom when I came. And they were still able to be successful, even though they had been excluded for 2 years. They were able to jump back in and be successful. So in this study, I compared my students with Down syndrome to the typically developing children. I compared their acquisition. So I had 6 students with Down syndrome that participated and 25 students, typically developing students, that participated in the study. And looking at receptive, so how much they understand, I did 24 different comparisons because I did 2 different tests of the receptive acquisition. And out of 24 comparisons, there were only 5 abnormal scores. Now, that doesn't mean that those scores represent no learning. It just means that there was a significant difference between what they were able to reach and what their peers reached. So I compared them to their peers in the same grade. And then I compared them also to the peers that had received the same number of years of language, right? Because same grade did not necessarily mean same number of years of language because they were excluded. So out of 24 comparisons, there were only 5 rare scores. I'd say that's pretty great. That's still success. In expressive, remember, kids with Down syndrome have an even extra deficit in expressive language. With 24 comparisons, there were only 3 rare or abnormal scores. So that's pretty impressive. And despite the fact that they were excluded for 2 years, they were still able to successfully participate and successfully acquire, many of them on par with their peers. Most of them on par with their peers. That's really exciting. So I'm coming to you speaking based off of this data, right? Not just my ideas or hopes, but like this is the actual data. So now we get to the meat, the top 10 principles to unlock the potential, facilitating successful participation and acquisition for students with disabilities in the brackets foreign language classroom or the math classroom or the English classroom. So participation, we don't want them to just be present in the room. We want them to be a part of what's happening, really participating. And then this word acquisition, it's a really important word when we're speaking about teaching a foreign language. So acquisition is understanding, communicating with, using the language. That is acquisition. Acquisition is not the same as learning about the language by explicit memorization and grammar exercises, right? You can memorize lists of vocabulary and memorize grammar tables, but not have acquired any language because you can't communicate using the language. So we are focusing here on students participating and being able to understand and communicate with the language. That's what we're talking about. Here we go. Principle number 1, raise your expectations. Raise your expectations. Now, a little bit more to my story when I was asked to teach the kids with Down syndrome. After I agreed, the admin said to me, oh, by the way, we don't actually expect them to learn Spanish. We just want them to do something different with their brains, have a brain break, have some fun. They didn't expect them to learn, even though they wanted them to be in the class. And one of their own teachers, one of their assistants said, I don't know why we're having them in Spanish class. Like they have a hard enough time with English as it is. Like this is stupid that we would expect them to learn another language. And the first year, the admin requested that the kids with Down syndrome come separate from their peers, not integrated with their peers, because they must not have thought that they could keep up. But they started learning Spanish, and it was really exciting. And by the end of that first school year, I said, these students are ready to be in the classroom with their peers. And so the next year they came with their peers. And by the end of that year, I was like, these kids are on par. These kids are on par with their peers. Now imagine this. Imagine, maybe you don't need to imagine, maybe this is similar to what you're living. Imagine you have a child, your son or your daughter with Down syndrome, also with a dual diagnosis of autism, with severe intellectual disability, and they're nonverbal. And they go to a summer camp at the local Down Syndrome Association, and you get told, hey, your daughter is going to have 6 weeks of Spanish every day. What would your expectations be? So this is not hypothetical. This is the story of one of the moms from the camp where I taught and did my doctoral research. And she said, in case you're wondering if a nonverbal child with Down syndrome and autism can learn a foreign language, the answer is yes. Not gonna lie, I had my doubts when I heard someone would be teaching Spanish to the kiddos at my daughter's summer program at Down Syndrome of Louisville. I'm disappointed in myself that I ever doubted her, my daughter, but thankful Miss Emily never did. So she posted this on Facebook with these videos that we're going to be seeing multiple times throughout these 2 webinars. And I know this mom, she's the type of mom that believes in her daughter, right? She believes that her daughter can do great things. She has high standards for her daughter. But when she heard that her daughter was going to be learning Spanish or taking Spanish class, she didn't actually think that her daughter would learn Spanish. And then she was very pleasantly surprised. So what you see in this video here, there's a little book. It says El Gato y el Perro, the cat and the dog. A big part of my Spanish class was telling stories. And then I would make that story into a little picture book, and I would record myself reading the story and put a QR code on the back of the book so that the parent could scan the QR code. And even if they don't speak Spanish, they can read the book with their child at home, and their child could hear the book again and again. And so this mom did that with her daughter. And then she was kind of testing out her daughter to see what her daughter could do, and she was amazed. So just keep in mind, she doesn't speak Spanish. She's got a great Kentucky accent as she speaks Spanish, but you can see why she was so pleasantly surprised.
Okay. Show Joey el gato. Show Joey el perro. Good job. El gato triste. El gato triste. Is he happy or sad? Triste.
All right. And one more video of her.
Show mommy mono. That's right. Show mommy perro. Yeah, dog. Show mommy gato. Cat, that's right. Show mommy tortuga. Turtle, that's right. Good job.
All right. So that was after 5 weeks of class. We still had 1 more week to go. But raise your expectations. These students can do so much more than we might imagine that they can. So I'm going to be sharing some quotes throughout this webinar. At the end of this camp, I debriefed with the classroom teachers. They were there, they were present, they were kind of like my assistants during Spanish class. And I got some feedback from them. So here's what they told me related to raise your expectations. I didn't solicit this from them. This is what they said. They believed in themselves because of how excited and encouraging you were. Expect them to learn the language because they will, but also meet them where they are. Every kid in that room felt like they were the smartest kid because you made them feel that way. So teachers, believe in your students with disabilities so that they too can believe in themselves. And so this brings us to our next point, our next principle, which is celebrate success. Celebrate success. Success is not perfection. I will say that again because it's really important. Success is not perfection. So one day at this summer camp, I was walking towards the building and some of my students were outside on the playground playing, and one of the students saw me and she started running and she yelled, "Miss Emily, I corre," which means, "Miss Emily, I runs." I runs, not I run. Did I say, "Oh, no, it's not I corre, it's corro"? No, you got the ending wrong there. No, I was like cheering for her and like, yes, Lola corre, acknowledging, celebrating that she just used the language in a spontaneous way. She communicated. I knew exactly what she meant. Even if she got the ending wrong, I knew exactly what she meant. That was a huge success, and I celebrated that. So celebrate success, not perfection. And it can be something big or it can be something small. It might be that the student points to the right picture. It might be that you tell the student in the target language to stand up and they stand up. Or it could be that they speak in a complete sentence, whatever it is. It can be big or it can be small, but we need to celebrate the successes of our students. And of course, it needs to be age and context appropriate. Like, you're not going to celebrate the success of a 5-year-old the same way you're going to celebrate the success of a 15-year-old. But celebration could be a hug, a high five, a fist bump. Maybe you have a special way, you just give one big clap, whatever. Maybe it's, the ASL way of celebration. Whatever it is, whatever is appropriate for that success and that age and that child, celebrate success. One of my students, one of the activities that we would do, we talked about animals a lot in class. Most of our stories were about animals, not people. And one of the little games that we would have is I would put several of the animals up on the board and give each student a turn and tell that student, touch, this is in Spanish, but tell them touch shark or touch turtle. And they would do it, right? Sometimes I would often like turtle and do the sign with it. So one of my students didn't always get it right the first time. That's okay. I would give him the support he needed, but his turn always ended in success. Always ended in success. And when he got it right, me and all the other teachers in the classroom would just cheer for him. And he would get so excited. He would turn around and run to his teacher and just like give her a big hug. And it was a huge celebration because he touched the correct animal. He was always excited to have a turn. He always wanted to participate because his turn always ended in a celebration of his success. He never feared that he was going to get it wrong. He knew that he was going to be successful, and we celebrated that. So what did the teacher say about celebrating success? He would get really excited when he would say something and you would confirm it was correct. He would turn around and say, "Yes, I got it right." Right? All I was doing was confirming, right? I wasn't like making a big deal, just confirming that he got it right. There was so much praise in the class. Everything was so positive and you were happy for them. So they wanted to learn and show me, the classroom teacher, they could do it. When we celebrate their success, students want to learn, they want to participate because they know that they can be successful. So we must first believe that our students with disabilities can be successful. That's raising our expectations. And then we help them believe that they can be successful by celebrating every success. So whether this is a foreign language classroom or it's at home and you're teaching your child how to load the dishwasher or tie his shoe or make his bed, or it's in math class, celebrate successes, big or small. Next, be flexible. This is really, really important. Be water, my friend. Be flexible. So when I started my doctoral research at the summer camp, I went in really confident. You know, I had taught kids with Down syndrome in the integrated classroom for 4 years. I was super successful. I had really figured out like my way of doing things, the way I tell my stories, the way I do everything. And I knew it worked for kids with Down syndrome. So I was pretty confident that I was going to be successful at this camp. The kids were divided into 3 different classes, roughly by age, but also somewhat by developmental level. And so the first class was the youngest class, but also developmentally the lowest class. Most of the children in that class were nonverbal or minimally verbal. Most of the children in that class had a dual diagnosis of autism or were being screened for autism. And it was only children with Down syndrome. It wasn't an integrated classroom. Everything I thought I knew worked, did not work in that classroom. I left that camp the first week probably crying because I didn't know what to do. Everything that I thought I was going to do, I couldn't do. I couldn't tell them a story because they couldn't all look in the same direction at the same time. I couldn't hold their attention for more than a few seconds, right? You give them a prop and they might eat it or throw it. Everything I thought would work did not work. And I had to be flexible. I had to let go of what I thought I knew would work and figure out other things. And the class didn't look like how I imagined it would look or how I might have wanted it to look. And the students in that class didn't learn at the same level as the other students, but they still learned. You know, the nonverbal children who spoke no English during the whole camp would tell me their body parts speaking in Spanish. You know, the kid, minimally verbal with autism, his parents said he would jump up the stairs and count in Spanish at home. But I had to let go of what I thought I knew and reinvent the wheel and learn from the other teachers there to see how they interacted with these children. I hadn't interacted with children with that level of needs before, and so many of them in the same classroom. So be willing to learn, be willing to adapt, be willing to do things which may make you uncomfortable. Like in this, you know, in the typical school setting, it's like, don't touch the children, don't hug the children, don't let the children sit in your lap, you know, like no physical contact. And in this classroom, the kids were sitting in the teachers' laps and the teachers were like, you know, helping the children do head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And I had to learn to be flexible and be okay with that. And this kids eventually started learning, and it was really exciting. And one of my other classes, story time. It's a huge part of my curriculum, telling stories. And when I went into the classroom, the kids were all sitting at tables. And so I was trying to tell my story and have the kids look over here at the board while I told my story. The kids were like completely disengaged. Eventually, we moved story time to a circle on the floor, and the kids were super engaged. I had to be flexible. I had to change how I tell my story and where I tell my story to keep the kids engaged. Typically, when I tell my stories, I draw them out. So I'm going slow and I'm drawing everything that I'm saying. But these kids they couldn't pay attention for that long, right? Like I couldn't hold their attention while I was drawing. So I had to move from drawings to using pre-prepared props and illustrations, getting everything ready ahead of time so that the picture was already ready for me to show them as I was telling the story. I had to be flexible, and eventually story time ended up being one of the favorite parts of class for a lot of the students and just a great way for them to learn the language. But it required being like water, very flexible. What do the teachers say? Don't try to control everything, and not everything will be perfect. You should all just like laminate that and put it up on the wall. Don't try to control everything, and not everything will be perfect. Whenever he had control of what was happening in the class, he loved what was happening. So a big part of being flexible is releasing control. Now, this does not mean chaos, right? We need to maintain order in the classroom. And it does not mean giving the children free rein to do anything and everything they want. But we need to allow the needs of the students to guide what we do and how we do it. If I would have insisted on staying at the tables or insisted on continuing to draw, the class would not have been as successful. I had to allow the needs of the students to guide what I did and be willing to give them choice. One of the students, I think it's he loved when he had control of what was happening in the class. It's very true. He really loved music. That was one of the only things that would keep him engaged. And so I had a list of the songs, and I would let him periodically choose which song we were going to do. So he had choice. Be willing to change when something doesn't work. Even if you think it's the best idea in the world, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and be willing to change. And I think this principle, be flexible, is really the key to successfully implementing the other principles that we're going to talk about. If we're not willing to be flexible, if we're unable to be flexible, then we're not going to be able to implement these other principles that we're about to move into. So go do your Pilates, do some stretching, and be flexible. All right. The next principle is cater to their strengths. Cater to their strengths to increase their participation in class and to maximize language acquisition. I don't know about you, but I like doing the things that I'm good at, right? Like, I don't like having to do the things that are a struggle for me that I'm bad at. You know, Carmen probably doesn't like to play the piano, right? Because she's not good at it. So you will increase student participation if you are catering to what they are good at. They're going to want to do and show off what they're good at, and it's going to be a lot easier for them. And it will also maximize their language acquisition when you're catering to their strengths. So with our students with disabilities, we have the tendency to think about all the things that they can't do, right? Like they have an impairment in this, they have a deficit in this, they struggle with this, they're not good at this. But we need to start thinking about what they can do, right? Just the game that we played, right? We all have strengths. We all have strengths. Even if it's not playing the piano, there is another strength that we have. One of Carmen's biggest strengths is connecting people. She's amazing. It's amazing. It's a huge strength, even if she can't play the piano. So one of my students that I had in the doctoral research was amazing at reading, which is not typical. He was only 7. It's not typical for a 7-year-old child with Down syndrome to be really good at reading. But the first time I met him, when I met him to give him some assessments before the study, it was so obvious that he was good at reading. He would read out loud, like everything he saw, all the signs on the walls, he was reading them. In class, he was reading. And one day we had a music video on in class, and by accident, it was a song in Spanish, but the captions in English came up. And he started reading the captions in English. And my first instinct was to hurry up and turn them off. Like, no, we can't have the captions on in English. But then I realized it was engaging him. This was the same kid that is only going to be engaged in class if he's doing what he wants to do, right? If he can control it. And so I started leaving the captions on in English, and he would like sing along to the song in English. Eventually, I turned the captions over to Spanish, and he would be like reading the captions, singing along. But even when the captions were in English, it was great because he was actually helping the other kids in the class understand what the song was saying. But it was his strength and it engaged him. It kept him engaged and it also helped him and the other students learn the language. There was another student when I was teaching in the integrated classroom that had an amazing memory, which again is not typical for students with Down syndrome. They often struggle to remember. Typically, they have a smaller vocabulary than their typically developing peers. But she seemed to remember like words in Spanish a lot better than her peers, or at least on par with the highest level in her class. And occasionally I would ask, like, what does this mean in English? Or how do you say this in Spanish? And I just noticed that she was really good at answering those questions. So I would often just interject those questions during class because she was good at it. And it gave her an opportunity to participate and to show off to her peers like that she was good at something. Like, and they could see like, oh, wow, like she knows a lot, but it kept her engaged because she was good at it. So maybe your student with a disability has a strength in learning visually. Students with Down syndrome, often that's a strength, is being able to see things that helps them remember. So if your student with a disability has a visual strength, cater to that strength. Provide lots of written language. Don't make them rely just on what they hear. Let them see the language written. Use pictures to support the language. Use illustrations, photographs or illustrations or drawings. You can use props. You can use gestures to add meaning to the language so that they can visually see it. It's their strength, so use it. It will help them. Maybe you have a kid with autism that has a really crazy memory. You know, like some kids with autism have this amazing strength to memorize scripts of songs and TV shows and movies. And a lot of times that's what they use to communicate. Like instead of saying, I'm tired, they might say a part of a script from a movie where the character is tired. And to some people that might seem annoying or like they're not communicating, but that's actually a strength and you can cater to that strength. So if you have a student that's really good at memorizing phrases and then using those phrases, provide them with fun and useful phrases in the target language. Maybe post them around the classroom and let them be available for the student to use and recognize and celebrate when they use that language. Celebrate that strength that they have and provide them with those fun, cool, quirky things to memorize and use. It's a strength. Maybe they have a textual strength. Maybe they're not great at like speaking, but they're really good at reading or writing. Provide the text for them or provide opportunities for them to write. But we can also think of other skills, strengths that are unrelated to learning or unrelated to language. You know, maybe a student is really good at singing. Maybe a student is really good at drawing. Maybe a student is really good at remembering dates. Like when I worked with in a center for kids with autism, I had one student, one client that could remember things that happened years ago. And he remembered what day of the week it was, the month and the day and the year, all kinds of things. Use that. Use it. Integrate it into the classroom. It's a strength. Whatever the strength may be, if they're great at dancing, integrate dancing. There's so much, especially in the foreign language classroom. Math teachers, maybe you can figure a way to integrate dancing into your classroom as well. The great thing about teaching a foreign language is you can really do anything and use anything as your tools and your subject matter. But to do this, you have to find out about their strengths, right? You need to know what they are good at, be it in the way that they learn or just other skills. So getting to know your students, whether it's directly from them or from other sources, or just paying attention to them in class and seeing what they're good at, and then just keep using that more and more and more. And next, what do they say? What do the teachers say? Use any activities that allow the child individually to showcase their skills in a way they love. Praise. Let the kids showcase their skills. Maybe in the foreign language classroom, the skill is cooking. Let the kid give a cooking demonstration and you can narrate it and talk about it in the foreign language, right? Even if it's not the child speaking, you are providing the language to the students and for the child, but they are getting to showcase what they are good at. And you can talk about it with the class in the target language. All right, and next, exploit their interests. Exploit their interests. So in my class, oh, I should have brought Monstro. I didn't bring him. He's asleep in a box somewhere. But I had a purple monster puppet. His name was Monstro, which is monster. And every class began, I would push in my little cart because I had to go from classroom to classroom. It was full of boxes. Each box had a number on it. And every class, Monstro was sleeping in a different box. And the kids took turns guessing which box Monstro was in. And then he would wake up and he would say hello to the class. It started with a general hello. And then he started saying hello to each child by name. And then eventually he started like giving every child a high five. And then somebody decided that Monstro was going to eat their hand. So then Monstro started every class, he has to greet every child and eat their hand. And then somebody decided they wanted Monstro to drink their water. And so what was supposed to be a pretty just quick, engaging activity to get students engaged for just a minute or two turned into like a 10-minute ritual where Monstro had to do all of these specific things every single time. But the kids were interested in it. Like, it didn't matter who Monstro was interacting with or talking to. All of the students were interested and engaged, and it was all happening in Spanish. Like, everything that Monstro did, eating the girl's hand, drinking from the boy's water, burping, eating his sandwich, didn't matter. I was narrating, I was talking about all of it in Spanish. So the kids were just hearing all of this language. Monstro was helping them understand what was happening, and they were interested. So I just took it as far as I could, milk it for all it's worth, because they were engaged. And if the students are engaged, they're going to be learning the language. So integrate their interests as much as possible. And this can be an interest related to class, like Monstro. It's an activity we had in class. The students were really interested, so I would stick with it for as long as I could. Or it could be something unrelated to class. I recently had someone tell me that they had like a parents' night out for parents of kids with special needs at their church. And they had one student come, and he had autism and he had a fascination with washing machines. And so somebody spent the whole evening just walking around to all the different rooms so that he could look for washing machines. If that student is in your class, then you can integrate washing machines into almost anything. Tell a story, put a washing machine in the story, have a random picture that you're going to talk about. There's a washing machine, whatever their interest is, no matter how quirky it is, you can probably find some way to occasionally integrate it into the class, and it will pique their interest. They will be engaged because it's something that they're interested in. So that means you need to find out about the interests of your students. And there's lots of ways you can do that. Just listen to what they talk about, right? What are they talking about? Are they talking about Winnie the Pooh? Are they talking, I don't know what all the modern characters are anymore, but whatever they're talking about, Legos or washing machines, exploit that, take it and use it. So listen to them, pay attention. You can explicitly ask them, or maybe, if they can't express that, maybe you ask like their parent or their classroom teacher who might know them a bit better. You might be able to give a survey to all of your students to find out what their interests are before class begins, before the school year begins, and integrate that into your lessons. Now I have 10 minutes, right? Okay. I'm trying to
So,
think if I should.
Emily, if you want, also we have next week's session. If you think you want to like spill over, or if you want to take like go into the question answer time, that's fine as well too.
Yeah, it's the next thing is the game, the volunteers. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
so I don't want to stop like in the middle of that, but I don't think 10 minutes is enough time
Okay, do you want to
to
save it for next week, the game,
do it.
or do you want to just try and
Yeah.
do like a little bit? We can go into question answer time with the game.
I think it would be most useful to keep the game together. So let's go into Q&A time. We can just have a little extra time for that. I'd rather do that than split the game up, and it wouldn't have the same effect. But y'all get ready. Next week, you need to be ready to participate. Okay. But now it's time for questions.
And actually, Emily, I have a question for you. As far as, and this might seem like it's coming out of left field, but like as far as like behavior management in the foreign language classroom, do you find that that is like more challenging, less challenging? Do you do it in the target language? Do you do it in English? Like what were your strategies for that? Because I feel like that's sometimes where things go off the rails. Like I'm thinking of my own like experience this past year with Spanish, and I couldn't do as much of what I wanted because I think for whatever reason I just didn't have a good behavior management strategy.
That's a really good question and really important. I think next week, some of the things I talk about might touch on that, but not completely. So I'll address it now. So in the integrated context, my students came with assistants. So typically there was one paraprofessional per one or two students with Down syndrome. So the most students with Down syndrome generally I would have in a class was two. And there would be one paraprofessional, one assistant. I try to address it first myself, just like I would with any other student, right? I don't want to delegate the kid with disabilities to their assistant, you know. So I try to address the problem first myself. I found that they would sometimes respond better to me than their assistant because their assistant is with them all day long. Sometimes they get kind of buddy with their assistant, right? And it is my job as the teacher. So I always take the first step and basically like, I've spoken with the assistants and it's kind of like, don't step in unless I can't handle the problem and class is becoming disrupted because of it. Depending on what the issue is, I might address it in the target language if it's something the child knows. It might just be like, sit up, sit or stand, and but everybody else is standing. It's time to stand, and the kid refuses to stand, right? I'm going to start by addressing that in the target language because I know the student knows that in the target language. I'm probably going to use a gesture to support understanding. If it doesn't work in the target language, I might default to English, right? Because I don't ever want speaking in Spanish to be a barrier to their behavior, but I don't just want to default to English all the time when I know they might understand it in Spanish. A lot of times that will correct it, right? When I address the issue, but sometimes it doesn't. Typically, if it's like a hitting or biting situation or a throwing a chair situation like that, the assistant takes care of that because that's putting somebody in danger, right? And so I need the assistant to deal with that for the safety of the child and the other students. If a child has those behaviors, typically the assistant is sitting right next to them, right? My students that didn't have those type of behaviors, I typically would have the assistant like behind them, or sometimes they're like on the other side of the room. Like my philosophy with the assistants is I want you to be as hands-off as possible because I want this child to be as independent as possible. So the assistant only sits as close as we know that child needs for their behavior, really. And even with my assistants, I tell them not to default to English. Like they're in the classroom, they're learning the language, right? Like if they're paying an ounce of attention, they are picking up on how to say stand up and sit down and look, like they know. And so I encourage them to use the target language for simple things like that. I also provide them with like laminated cards that have a picture with the word in Spanish, like sit down, look, silencio or whatever. Those common basic phrases that will address a lot of the behavior issues. But if you need to use English to address a dangerous, harmful, or abnormally disruptive behavior, then use English. Please ask a follow-up question if you have a follow-up, or if anyone else has a follow-up question about behavior, because that is the biggest barrier to successful participation is the behavior. Do you have a follow-up question with that, Carmen?
So yes, so we have a couple of things coming in the chat now. Maureen, do you want to read those out to us, and then we'll go there, and then I do have a follow-up question, but I can wait until after.
Carmen, why don't we do your follow-up question, since it's related?
Sure. So the follow-up question I have is there anything, and you kind of got to it with like the laminated cards with certain things, like, is there anything I can do like front loading? Like I know I'm going to have this student. What are some things that, like, maybe I don't know them that well yet, but like, are there some things that I could use generally for any student to help support behavior in the classroom, like before the first day? So like I have maybe some things, and like I'm gonna have to be flexible, right? I might have to change it, but can I have something ready to go?
Yeah. I think this is where it is important to know a little bit about the child and maybe meet with the paraprofessional beforehand. I think for many reasons, if possible, to meet with the paraprofessional beforehand to talk about the student and also your expectations. We'll get maybe more into this next time, but not just for behavior, but for like how the paraprofessional might support the student content-wise as well. You need to be on the same page. I think if you use a lot of the strategies that we're going to talk about next time, because this first part was kind of like more inspirational, and we get more into the nitty-gritty in this next half. If you're using a lot of these other supports that we're going to talk about, you may see fewer behavior issues. But you can be proactive. Maybe it's that the student might need extra breaks, might need some sensory support. Have that space and those things ready beforehand. Don't wait until the child has a breakdown to figure out, okay, where can this child go to take a safe break? Like, have that space ready, and be ready to allow the child to move around. If you're ready for that, it'll be a lot easier.
So that's helpful. Thank you. And that's a great teaser for everybody to come back next week to get the full basket of everything. So thank you for that.
So Emily, there are a couple of questions that came in via the chat.
Yeah.
Gabri has asked how she can adapt a curriculum to effectively include she's looking for actionable ways to balance differentiated instruction while maintaining the rigor and pacing required for the rest of the class.
I would say first, what is good for the student with disabilities is good for all of your students. That doesn't mean that you have to do everything catered to the exact needs of your student with Down syndrome. But when you implement things to help the child with Down syndrome, it's probably going to help the rest of the class. Gabri, I'm interested to know what age group do you teach? What level of language do you teach?
I'm losing my voice, so I will be really quick. This past year was my first year in high school, and I had a girl with Down syndrome in my
Mm-hmm.
Spanish 1 class. And it was so difficult because that class was also with a lot of kids with learning problems too. Um, so I tried my best, and the girls stay only for the first 2 or 3 weeks in my class. But I did everything, with pictures, without pictures. Also, she has a peer mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I did breaks. I did a lot of stuff, but I couldn't retain her, so that's the reason was my question. How can
Mm-hmm.
and it was a big class with 25 or 26 kids. So that was the reason I was asking that.
Yeah, thank you, Gabri. That's really challenging. I don't know I don't know what your style of teaching is. I don't know what the curriculum requirements are. So I don't know what fast-paced necessarily means. I would encourage you, if you're able, it sounds like your student with Down syndrome wasn't the only student with a disability, maybe just the disability with the highest need. If you are able to slow down a little bit in some ways, it will probably benefit all of your students. I really encourage you to come back next week, or at least watch the recording, because we're going to get more into the nitty gritty of what it looks like to teach the language and adapt things for students with disabilities. So, given just the limited information and time that we have, that's all I could say for now. But I really encourage you to come back next week, and then maybe we can, if we have time, talk through some more things based off of what you see next week. So thanks for asking your question.
And then Emily, Johanna was asking about, and I think maybe management a little bit, behavior management a little bit. She was talking about, she just essentially auditing the Spanish class, was not being graded. And so keeping that child engaged, was looking for some thoughts on strategies for, trying to keep that child engaged to, whether they recognize it or not, maybe really did. So how much do you press, I guess, into that child?
Yeah. Johanna, again, what age is this?
She was in 4th grade.
4th grade. Okay. So I think part of this, it seems, is that's interesting. A 4th grader auditing a class.
Well, in the school that I work, they audit the front Spanish
Yeah. So
in
basically, she's in
third.
the class, but they don't expect anything out of her.
Exactly, but she was just melt down or lay down on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
She didn't want to participate.
I understand. Yeah, I had those students as well in my doctoral research. I think a lot of what we talked about today could be helpful. Like, if you can find out what her strengths are and find out what her interests are and include that in the class, she might eventually be interested. She might want to participate when you're talking about ponies and unicorns. I don't know if she's interested in that, whatever. Or if she, really loves to stand on her head, or I don't know, just whatever she loves and is good at. If you can integrate those things into the class, into what you're talking about, or into what you're doing. I think of, like one student that I had, he was a little bit younger than she was, but he didn't want to participate. I didn't force him to participate. I would maybe sometimes go and stand next to him when we're doing a song and dance next to him. Eventually, he started wanting to participate, but I didn't force him. So maybe you can, I don't know what your relationship with her is like. I don't know what conversations you have had with her, but just make sure that she knows you're so happy that she's there and she's always welcome to participate, but you're not going to force her. Because you can't,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You can't.
No,
And
I
so-
am agree.
And so she needs a motivation, so maybe finding out what she's good at and what she's interested in will motivate her. And then also what we're going to talk about next week, because I've also found, when I started the 6 weeks with my students at the beginning, a lot of them were anxious and they didn't participate as much because it was so different and so new. I hardly spoke any English. It was almost all Spanish. And so it was kind of like, and I made it understandable for them, but it was a little overwhelming at the beginning. But once they got over that hump and they started understanding and knowing, then they knew that they could successfully participate and they wanted to. And so I think some of the principles that we're going to talk about next week might be some practical principles that you can help her be successful. And when she sees that she can be successful, she might be willing to participate. She might be afraid that she doesn't understand or be afraid to fail. And so it's safer to refuse to participate than to do something and fail. So those would be my tips for that. Just keep smiling, letting her know how happy you are and excited you are that she's there, being positive about it rather than trying to you have to do this. Because unfortunately, the school has kind of set it up against you as the teacher, they're not expecting anything from her, requiring anything from her. And so she feels she doesn't have any other motivation. And so you need to get her motivated by whatever she's good at or interested in and make it a safe place for her.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Emily, if I could ask a follow-up to that, maybe you could speak to a little bit of timeline for the students to acclimate to Spanish class, because you kind of mentioned it that it was so shocking and new for them. What is reasonable for us as teachers to expect? How long is the horizon, right? We know it's going to be longer, but it might be good to kind of know so that obviously we're going to want it to happen sooner than it will. But so what's reasonable to expect?
I think it depends on the child. It depends on your teaching and the environment in the classroom. It depends on their classmates. I think in the integrated classroom in my school, with the culture that was there, the kids with Down syndrome were really loved, and they were really special and important. And their classmates wanted them to be involved. Their classmates wanted to help them. And so but I only saw them once a week for 40 minutes. Once a week for 40 minutes. For some of the students, they acclimated pretty quickly. I think especially because they had their typically developing peers that they could just kind of follow, just do what they're doing. But for others, I think it remained stressful for quite a while because they were only coming once a week for 40 minutes. They often got there late because they were coming from some special service. And so, it messes up their routine. When I had the students every day, 45 minutes a day in the separate, it wasn't integrated. It was at the Center for Kids with Down syndrome. The 6 weeks, I'd say definitely the first week was challenging, maybe scary for the kids because it was so different. But after the third week, it was just took off. The kids knew what to expect. They understood the language that I was using. And so it was just a lot easier for them, right? They knew what to expect. They knew what to do. They knew that they could be successful. They knew that they could understand. They knew how they could participate. So definitely after 3 weeks, but that was 45 minutes a day for 5 days a week. So yeah, it really depends on how often you see them, what the culture of the school, the relationships between the students. We'll talk about this a little bit next time, but the more that you can do to support understanding and the more that you can have a predictable routine, the more quickly the students are going to acclimate and be comfortable. Routine is super, super, super important. And so if they know what to expect, they're going to be less anxious and feel safer to participate.
Emily, I would just ask, as a school administrator, former school administrator, uphill battle of having students with disabilities in the classroom was when there's an overall policy for the district that says students with disabilities, et cetera, can be exempted from foreign language. So what are those pieces? As the administrator, I think students would excel in that classroom, do well in that classroom, but how do you speak to the parents about that? When a parent comes to you and says, well, my child can't even read yet, and you want them in a foreign language, why? I mean, what do you say? What do you say to those parents?
Yeah. I think it's great if you as an administrator believe in that the student can. Maybe the parents have been told that their child can't, right? Or they're afraid for their child, or they just don't know that their child can. And so that's why I wanted to do my research. I never wanted to get a PhD, never wanted to be a university professor, but I wanted the world to know that kids with Down syndrome can learn a foreign language. Literally, that's why I did the research, because I want the world to know about it. So you can let them know about my research. It's coming out in a book in 2027. I've already submitted it to the publisher, but I'll send you my dissertation, that there, I can't speak for every disability, but by and large, the research shows that children with Down syndrome, children with speech language impairment, or developmental language, I can't remember what it's called, but language delays and with autism, being exposed to a foreign language does not harm their first language development. And it can even have benefits. Like bilingual children with Down syndrome have an overall larger vocabulary than monolingual children with Down syndrome. Being exposed to 2 languages can help with executive functioning, which is a weakness in kids with autism and many other developmental disabilities. So there may not only can your child be successful, but they might reap benefits from it. And reading and writing are skills. They are not language, right? They are skills. So your child, even if your child can't read or write yet in their first language, it doesn't mean they can't learn to begin to communicate, to understand and communicate in a second language. And I, as the administrator, am supportive of this, and I want to see your child be successful, and we're going to do whatever we can to help your child be successful. And I really hope that you would be supportive and see how much fun your kid can have in Spanish class. That's what I would say. And hopefully they listen.
Well, I think that is a perfect place to close this webinar, because it just encapsulates everything that we're saying. And it's a message for our administrators, it's a message for our teachers, for our parents. Thank you so much, Emily, for doing this research and believing so much in our young people with intellectual developmental disabilities that you got a PhD to show everybody. And that is no small feat. So thank you so much. And I really do hope all of you will join us next week on Monday. On the 13th, we'll be getting together, same bat time, same bat channel. So 6:30 p.m. on the Zoom. You have the link. Tell your friends, invite a friend. We'd love to have more of you come and bring your questions. Now that you've gotten to see a little bit about what Emily is going to teach us, come with your questions for next time. So thank you all so much and have a great evening.
Awesome. Thank you all.